You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. My guest today, returning to the program, is Nina Lvovna Khrushcheva. Former Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev was Nina's biological great-grandfather, but when her father and her grandfather died, he adopted her. She was only 2 years old, and she grew up in the corridors of power of the Kremlin. She lives in the United States now and is no friend of Putin's. She's a Russian expert who has an insight into the Russian political soul, more nuanced and with more dimension than any I have encountered or read. And she's with us today to share some of that complexity and with the way that Putin regards the United States, and also let us know how that differs from the way the Russian people regard the United States. So that's coming up in today's Women's Media Center Live, along with the Surrealism Corner and Fighting Words. But first we need to go inside the headlines. A brief summary of the acts of what once was our government over the past days would have to include Trump praising the House Lack of Intelligence Committee for closing down after exonerating him from all collusion with Russia, when actually only half the committee announced that, with the other half protesting. Trump welcoming a trade war, Trump imposing tariffs that sent the business community into a meltdown, Trump having a meltdown over his son-in-law being treated unfairly with a downgraded security access, poor lamb, just for doing business deals in the White House and for having shadowy money relationships all over the world, Trump saying that he would meet with North Korea's dictator, Trump being sued by a former sex industry actor trying to return Trump's hush money and speak out because now she's a member of Me Too, Trump backing off meeting with North Korea's dictator, Trump campaigning to save a GOP Pennsylvania congressional seat, he failed, and turning his appearance into his own campaign rally, Trump backing down on the meeting with the North Korea dictator, Trump backing down on gun reform, Trump backing down on DACA, Trump calling the anchor of Meet the Press, the oldest running political analysis program on television, a son of a bitch, Trump insulting Congresswoman Maxine Waters with yet another racist and sexist comment, Trump repeating his plan to back out of, or maybe not, meeting with the North Korean dictator, Trump firing his Secretary of State by tweet and designating as his new Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, formerly his appointed CIA director, an American firster who can be relied on to react to insane foreign policy decisions without even the feeble protest that Tillerson made, and who devoutly attends a weekly Bible group run by fundamentalist evangelicals exposed on this program in January, namely Ralph Drollinger, founder and president of Capital Ministries, who is focused on, quote, creating and sustaining discipleship ministries to political leaders. In his book, Rebuilding America, the Biblical Blueprint, Drollinger states that social welfare programs have no basis in Scripture. Christians in government have an obligation to hire only Christians. Women should not be allowed to teach grown men, and the institution of the state is and must be a, quote, avenger of wrath, close quote, because its, quote, God-given responsibility is to moralize a fallen world through the use of force, close quote. How's that for a Secretary of State? Drollinger runs an elite weekly Bible study group for Pompeo, Betsy DeVos, the laughable Secretary of Education, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and Vice President Mike Pence. Are we feeling safer now? Normally, that opening paragraph would have gone in the Surrealism Corner segment of the program, but hey, people, it's actually what passes for news now. Happily, though, news also includes the close, but now more than apparent returns from that Pennsylvania special election for Congress, in which Trump's favorite crashed after having been campaigned for by the toxic Donald. And news certainly includes and celebrates the hundreds of thousands of high school and middle school students who staged a walk out of school on March 14th to protest at local and federal legislatures all across the country, demanding their right to gun-free safety in school and demanding respect as human beings, and, since some of them turn 18 before this very November, demanding respect as voters. News also includes the story that African Americans have been deserting evangelical churches in droves. Furthermore, according to data from the Pew Research Center, support for Trump among white evangelical women has dropped 13 percentage points compared with only 1 year ago. It appears that white evangelical men are having second thoughts too, although in smaller numbers. I guess the cognitive dissonance in supporting this man became just too hard to tolerate for those who took their Christianity seriously. It's not news, or at least it's not new, to say that women's progress everywhere is inextricably tied to the availability of contraception. In the U.S. Supreme Court decisions in 1965 and 1972, we recognized the constitutional right to contraception, and that made it much more likely that women went into higher education, entered the paid workforce, and found their own economic power, all because they could choose whether and when they would have children. A 2012 University of Michigan study found that by the 1990s, women who had early access to the pill had wage gains of up to 30% compared with older women. Now, the Trump administration is on its way to undoing that, with the recent announcement about funding for a major family planning program called Title X, or Title X. Since 1970, the government has awarded Title X grants to providers of family planning services to help low-income women afford them, and also to help low-income women afford pap smears and breast exams and so forth. But conservative men are fuming that this is using tax dollars to subsidize women's sex lives. So the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Population Affairs, in outlining its new priorities for grants, makes no reference whatsoever to contraception. Zero. Zip. Nada. In setting its grant standards, instead, it wants to fund, quote, innovative services and emphasize fertility awareness, close quote, approaches, like the so-called rhythm method. You remember the old joke, what do you call people who use the rhythm method? Answer, parents. Valerie Huber, a longtime advocate of abstinence until marriage education programs, is in charge of Trump's Title X office after the resignation in January of Theresa Manning, who vocally opposed abortion and contraception. From the frying pan into the fire. Women's health care advocates call this a flat-out assault on women's health. Here's another chilling thought. The number of glaciers at Glacier National Park in Montana is down to 26. When the national park was created in 1910, there were over 150 glaciers. Now 26. Better go see those glaciers while you can before they melt south and you're swimming in them. The Me Too wave continues to gather strength around the world. During this year's famous Carnival celebrations in Brazil, women chose to push back against sexual harassment. They held block parties of all female musicians. They had their own floats. They wore shirts and necklaces and crowns with messages like, "My breasts, my rules." And in China, where you will remember some women have actually been arrested for daring to accuse powerful men in academia and business of sexual harassment and assault, and where Me Too has been branded as a destabilizing foreign movement with the hashtag MeToo censored, well, social media users have got round the censors by creative use of pun substitutes like hashtag rice bunny, a phrase which, when pronounced aloud in Chinese, is pronounced Me Too. And once again, how about Pennsylvania's slap in the orange face of Trump, who carried that deep red district in 2016 by 19 points, and it's now gone blue. We have now flipped 40 seats. And most of all, how about those high school students? Maybe the future is actually brightening. We have to take a break now. This is Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be back directly with the Surrealism Corner.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and let's scoot right into the Surrealism Corner. I know that popular music lovers among you will be thrilled to learn that on average, for the most popular songs each year, women make up 22% of the performers, 12% of songwriters, and just 2% of producers. That's a bit off-key, to say the least, and so ridiculous it's surreal. The word mansplaining has made it onto the floor of the mother of all parliaments in London. On March 8th, British Prime Minister Theresa May, hardly your average raging radical feminist, snapped at the opposition leader, "Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for telling me that it's International Women's Day tomorrow? I think that's what's called mansplaining." Meanwhile, in Germany, Kristen Rose Möhring, Equal Opportunities Officer for the Family Ministry, proposed following the examples of Canada and Austria in changing certain lyrics in Germany's national anthem, Deutschland über alles, to gender-neutral ones like revising fatherland to homeland and altering a line about the German people's striving, quote, brotherly with heart and hand, so they would be striving courageously instead. There was a lot of pushback, and Angela Merkel, who has her hands really pretty full these days and looks a bit haggard from the exhaustion from dealing with Trump, well, she recommended that Ms. Rose Möhring perhaps should just start singing her own words and hope that others follow. Look, I know these cosmetic gestures are well-intentioned, and they do help spread consciousness, and I'm all for them. But we really need deep structural change. And even with these superficial revisions, well, I'm sorry to carp, but in Germany's case, if we're fixing the national anthem of Deutschland, I think we might start with basics and change the über alles part first. I don't know about you, but I have some very dear friends who are always drinking water. Now, that is a good thing to do. I know that's healthy. I know I don't drink enough water. I'm not even one of those people who carry water bottles around with them because, one, I forget. Two, I grew up in an era where there were still water fountains everywhere, so I'm always surprised these days to find that they're not, even though I know that they're not. And three, carrying water around makes my already capacious handbag even heavier than it is, what with books, chargers from my cell phone, sometimes my iPad, Purell bottles, my Swiss Army knife, and stuff. I am not a Sherpa. So the water bottles I meant to carry around stay nice and cool in my fridge. I survived the period where some people competed via the brand of water they were toting around, which brand was purer, which came from which remote spring in the Alps, and which cost a small fortune more than everyone else's. Well, the nasty streak in my lower self took considerable pleasure on discovering from a recent study by researchers at the California Institute of Technology that if you drink too much water, you could die. No, not drown. You could die of water intoxication. Some people apparently have a syndrome called polydipsia, or excessive thirst, and they drink enormous quantities of water, which apparently can be dangerous because if the blood is diluted too much, you can expire as a victim of water intoxication. But this is one peril I am not in danger of. although I may well perish from dry mouth. I pass this little health note along so that if you have beloved but irritatingly superior water-slurping friends who worry that you drink too little agua, now you can respond by warning them that they may be polydipsiacs and they are in danger of death by water. Then again, if they croak by slurping, maybe they can be brought back to life by reversing time. No, I haven't gone totally round the bend, and if ever an item deserved placement in the Surrealism Corner, this one's it. Physicists have done an extraordinary experiment on reversing the arrow of time. At the microscopic level, the laws of physics are symmetrical with respect to time. They work just as well whether time runs forward or backwards. But at the macroscopic level, processes all have a preferred direction. The great physicist Arthur Eddington called this the arrow of time. Just why the arrow points in one direction but not the other is one of the great scientific puzzles. The standard answer is that the arrow of time follows from the second law of thermodynamics, which is that disorder, or entropy, always increases in a closed system. So that's why you can't unscramble scrambled eggs, and why a hot cup of tea heats your hands as you hold it, but not the other way around. However, the other factor at work is the universe's initial conditions. For reasons yet unknown, the early universe was hot, and its energy was distributed evenly, and that's a low entropy state for a system dominated by gravity. Are you still with me? Well, hang on. Over time, the entropy has continually increased, which is what has largely determined the direction of the arrow of time. But if the initial conditions determine the direction, it may be possible to create systems on Earth imitating those initial conditions, and that could force the arrow to run in the opposite direction. Keonan Mekadai and his team at the Federal University of ABC in Brazil have built such a system for the first time, allowing them to observe a cold object heating up a hotter one. The new system is a mixture of chloroform dissolved in acetone, followed by complex recipe directions mixing carbon and hydrogen nuclei using a technique called nuclear magnetic resonance. It also involves the utterly surreal quantum process of entanglement. I love this. A truly wondrous process in which two quantum particles share the same existence. I mean, you gotta admit, that's cool stuff. In any event, for us lay people, these scientists have created the unique set of initial conditions that allow heat energy to flow in the opposite direction. They claim that their results on the thermodynamic arrow of time might also have stimulating consequences on the cosmological arrow of time, because the phenomenon is not limited to microscopic systems. And if you find this a little terrifying, look at it this way. We could start by Trump never having been born in the first place. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. Time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a moment with my special guest, Nina Khrushcheva. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Nina Khrushcheva is a Russian-American professor of international affairs in the graduate program at the New School in New York. She's also a senior fellow of the World Policy Institute and a contributing editor to Project Syndicate Association of Newspapers Around the World. She's the author of numerous articles. They have appeared in Newsweek, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and other publications. She had a 2-year research appointment at the School of Historical Studies of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and then she served as deputy editor of the East European Constitutional Review at NYU School of Law. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and she's the author of Imagining Nabokov, Russia Between Art and Politics, published in 2008, and the author of The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind, published in 2014. Here is Nina Lvovna Khrushcheva. Nina, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
I have to start with an apology to you and our listeners. They are doing construction, as life would have it, right next door to our studio. And although we've desperately asked them to, mesh scheduling, they can't do that. And so we've buffered our studio till it looks like a padded cell. But some pounding may get through, so I apologize in advance.
My condolences.
Yes, I know. New York is New York. Well, my God, Nina, a lot has happened since the last time you were here. I grew up in a period where the Russians were, of course, the bad guys because of communism and the Red Scare and all that. And being a leftist progressive, even before I became a feminist, that meant that I, of course, was incredibly pro, even in those situations where Russia might have been doing, not naughty things. And now it's so weird to be asked to be anti-Russia because Russia is so far right. I mean, the only constant seems to be authoritarianism. Help. I know that one of your books is called The Lost Khrushchev, A Journey into the Gulag of the Russian Mind. Is that what's the problem? A bend toward authoritarianism? How can this be?
Well, I ask this question myself every day. But I wouldn't really call Russia authoritarian yet. And that's one of the problems, I think, with American understanding of it, is because Putin is such a compelling villain and Russia is such a convenient enemy for the United States at all times.
Exactly.
During the Cold War, post-Cold War, it's very politically correct to really feel bad about the Russians. Somebody needs to have an enemy to feel better about themselves, so the Russians fit the bill. But generally, I think it's a mistake.
No, I was just going to say, not those of us who love Akhmatova and Pushkin and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, go on. I know what you mean.
Well, but if you, Russia is problematic, but the problems that are assigned to Russia are beyond even the worst version of Star Wars. And, even the Russians now, they make fun of it themselves. They actually have this hashtag blame the Russians. So they do believe that the West just immediately take them to task for anything that is being done elsewhere. But the point is, and actually that is one of my concerns, is that authoritarianism is almost close to dictatorship. It is North Korean formula. Authoritarianism, probably, Turkey's an authoritarian country.
Right.
Russia, for now, is still more of an autocratic country than an authoritarian one. Mm-hmm. And that is something that one has to remember, because when Russia turns dictatorship, which it may well be, Russia has elections, presidential elections, on March 18th, and Putin supposedly will win these elections, which of course he will. He is popular enough, but it's also rigged enough to make him even more popular. And he will stay there if anything goes well, everything goes well, for another 6 years. So dictatorship is an entirely possible opportunity. But for now, saying Putin stays a dictator is actually takes away from what he would become, because who is Stalin then if Putin is a dictator? So I would say it's a very strong autocracy leaning towards authoritarian regime, leaning towards potentially dictatorial. And in the Gulag of the Russian Mind, the book that you mentioned, I do write about that Russians do like strong leaders, and it's not just kind of a dismissal of the incompatibility of democratic thinking, they can. It's just they never really had a good example of it. And with a strong leader, the decision that is made for such a big country, I just went through the whole length of it, from Kaliningrad in Germany and Poland on the border to Kamchatka, where, Sarah Palin saw Putin in her backyard. So it is a very, very big country, and in order to keep that country somewhat coherent, it is an understanding that the strong leadership will make you go through difficulties that all these regions that are bordering on many different parts of the world may come incoherently, but the Kremlin will make it all. So yes, there is always this idea that the strong hand is very important for Russian integrity, for Russian sovereignty, for Russian independence, for Russia not being the last country in the world, and whatnot. So in this, absolutely, Putin is a perfect leader of Russia.
Well, we Americans, as you know, because you live here, get the feeling that somehow there's an almost impossibility to stop him, not only because the moron in the White House is doing absolutely nothing to stop the next round of elections this fall from being meddled with, but because he is so worshipful of Putin. But there must be, Putin is human. What should we be doing that would at least slow him, if not stop him, or turn him, change him? Are any of those possible? One of them must be at least the slowing, if we had a president who was intelligent, but we don't. So given the current circumstances until he's impeached, what should America be doing that clearly it isn't?
Well, I don't think that America can stop Putin in whatever it is he's feeling in terms of the United States and doing with or for or against or whatnot the United States, because he does not believe that America is always right. He believes that America has been doing the same thing to all the countries in the world, including Russia.
He's not totally
wrong.
And so
now, he's not totally wrong. He's not wrong.
Right.
And, he always cites this great example. He has many examples, like the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, wonderful examples for him, and nobody really has been able to dispel those examples that he uses. Why Dick Cheney is not in prison, which is a really very good question.
I'll say
the same thing exactly. So the same thing when Colonel Gaddafi of Libya was being killed with the sort of charge of democratic change. And the Russians at the time went with this, and then suddenly it just turned out so remarkably murderous, and Putin keeps saying, what is your democracy about? So he, in his mind, and in fact in many people's mind, he does have a point. He may go very Russian hard hand about it, but he doesn't think he's in any wrong at all.
Right.
And when the United States is having this incredible psychosis around, oh my God, what does Russians do? Putin looks at Americans saying, well, I'm sorry, do you run around saying you're so democratic, you change regimes, you're trying to change me, essentially, you were trying to change me, and Hillary Clinton did say that the Russian people, before his previous election or whatever when he was becoming president in 2012, Hillary Clinton did say that Russian people deserve better government. For him, that sounds regime change, and he has seen it happen. So where Putin is concerned, I just really would like to stress it, he thinks that hysteria around that election is an incredible confirmation of complete hypocrisy of the United States. You meddle in other countries, but when I, the strong Russian leader, come and do it to you, look at you. What kind of democracy is that, he thinks, that can be so easily undermined? But Russia, who Barack Obama called an insignificant nation.
Yeah, that was not a smart move.
No, exactly. And so for him, this is perfectly justifiable, and therefore there is nothing the United States can really do to convince him to behave differently until the United States abides by its own rhetoric.
Right. Well, that's an understandable position. It despairs me because unfortunately, I don't see our foreign policy changing, and I don't think that Trump's bromance with Putin has anything to do with really changing our foreign policy. I think.
Absolutely not.
It comes from a totally different place.
Absolutely, but also Trump's own example is like, well, I'm sorry, you were chastising me for being X, Y, Z, and look at your own president.
Yeah.
Look, you have a clown. At least I'm a real person, thinks Putin.
Uh-huh.
So it really does, none of it really helps those relationships, and because nobody does seem to be thinking strategically, clearly, in terms, Trump kept saying, I'm such a great deal maker. You can make deals with Putin. You just don't need to insult him
right.
or kiss his parts of his body on one side or another side.
Right.
And so, but that moment already has passed.
Yeah, I see.
So it does need a regime change on both sides, or at least in America, when somebody with clear thinking about diplomacy and not creating an enemy would come back and start anew, the way, in fact, Khrushchev and Kennedy started after 1962, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they took a pause, saying it was horrible, we're at the bottom of it, how do we get out of it? But I don't see on any side at this point any real decision to do that.
No, that would have to be a change of government on our side because we can't control the other. And we're working on the change of government. We're working on it. But dancing as fast as even faster than we can. So let me take a leap sideways here. It's hard to separate the drama, sometimes the melodrama, the dossier, the poisonings, from the propaganda against Russia. Do those kinds of tactics fit into Putin's gambit? In other words, are they part of our demonization of Russia? Or do they, in your mind, have credence? People keeling over on London streets from being poisoned, the use of women as bait in Russian spycraft. I suppose women are used as bait in all spycraft. All of the above that is being bandied about Russia, while Trump is meanwhile doing nothing to, not necessarily anti-Russia, but to protect the voting integrity in the United States. Are those extreme demonizations, or would that be part of the toolkit of Putin?
Well, I think it would be part of the toolkit, but it's also part of the extreme demonization. And the more demonization happens, the more little things that we wouldn't have paid attention before. And because now I'm watching it very closely, and the minute the word Russia appears, and it's like, oh my God, Russia, woo! Yeah. Something happened. So Russia is by definition becomes, the minute you mention Russia by definition becomes guilty of something. We don't even know yet, but just the word itself already is a mark. In terms of toolkit, that horrible story, and once again another killing in London, which was terrifying. But I am not that I'm thinking that is not part of the Russian toolkit, and it is a possibility. Once it's not proven yet, and therefore, after living here for almost 30 years, I always would like to say allegedly, and I think part of the demonization, we already assume that must be the case. So instead of just taking a deep breath and figuring it out, I was like, but because, and I think that, by the way, that dossier that was originally created about the Russian meddling, the dossier, but not the dossier, what was it?
Yes.
The document that came out by intelligence, there was a lot of conjecture there. Just because we think Russia is bad, that must be the case. And I think that adds to demonization, but also Putin's response. Because at this point, Putin is so demonized that, in fact, he has incredible pleasure in what is like, well, of course you're going to blame the Russians. But it also gives him, right or wrong, it gives him an opportunity for the Russians. That's why these elections, as rigged as they may be, they're still going to be real, because with the United States looking at Russia this way and blaming them for every single thing and kind of assigning and assigning demonic nature to Russia actually gives him a great opportunity to say to the Russians, I'm the only one who can protect you from this horror.
Yeah.
I mean, look at them. Look at them. They hate you. They just hate you by the fact that you are called a Russian. The attitude towards the Russians is horrible, and that helps his own promotion of power. So these things are very complex things, and I think since we started this conversation with the Cold War, in the Cold War they were very credible and very experienced diplomats who would say, if you say this, the Russians would respond this way. So we might not do that because there was a chess game. There's no chess game.
No.
People just go on and do whatever.
Right.
And instead of actually stopping Putin, they're helping his own autocratic, future authoritarian, future dictatorial agenda.
My God. What about the internal dissent, the democratic, the attempt at a democratic movement, the marches that break out now and then, the demonstrations, I don't know whether to call it the resistance or the insurgent or the underground.
Well, no, it's a protest movement.
Protest.
It's a simple protest movement.
Protest.
It does exist, and part of the moving from autocracy to authoritarianism is that people still go out on the streets, but they're more and more prohibited from doing so.
Uh-huh.
For example, they were, and I'm going to Moscow to participate in that march, which may not happen, against the elections, because the law supposedly says that you cannot protest, you cannot make political statements on the election day, so you're not going to be allowed to protest. But there's certainly something of a problem for Putin, not this other motley candidates that I think 7 other people are running that are really not of any interest. I mean, it's from kind of Trumpian candidate Ksenia Sobchak to former communist or current communist. So they're not really that important or interesting, but the one that would have been somewhat in opposition to Putin, Alexei Navalny, the anti-corruption lawyer, and I think we talked on this program about him before, is that he's the one who was banned from running because he was supposedly embezzled and being prosecuted, his own corruption. He's an anti-corruption lawyer. So but his centers continue to exist, and that's where we are in autocratic state, not authoritarian yet. His centers continue to exist. They continue to protest. And the reason he was banned, he's allowed to continue his political activity. The reason he's banned is because Putin is an autocratic leader. So he's going to get about probably 70%. He wants 80 because that is his move to authoritarian. That he wants to be like, I am universally loved. I'm not just 70% loved. But Navalny would probably, and that's what I saw during my travel through all Russia, probably would take about 30%. For Russia, an autocratic state, that is a lot of percentage of an opposition.
Huge. Yes, that's very
interesting. And for that, he was banned, not because he has a chance, but because his popularity of 30% embarrasses Putin. Putin needs to be all man of all people. And that's how, in a sort of this gulag of the Russian mind, that's how petty the autocratic mind is that I want to take all power. So if Navalny were running, that would have been actually a real election. Putin would have won, but Navalny would have positioned himself as a viable politician.
A viable, alternative.
Right, a rival politician. For now, opposition exists. He exists, but in major thing that counts, which is running for president, he is being ousted just because the embarrassment to Putin for an autocratic power would have been inconceivable.
I worry about you going back there. I mean, particularly given your name and your family.
I go all the time.
You do?
No, I go all the time. And I, as I said, in the summer I went through all Russia, and, my mother was expecting that I would be attacked either for my name or for anti-Putinism.
Right.
But people were very friendly, and in fact, you will be surprised, nobody hates America. Everybody wants to know what America is. Everybody wants to know how Russia compares. And the only place where I experienced any anti-Western feeling was, drum roll, Kaliningrad, which is essentially Europe. It used to be former Germany, Königsberg, and this is the only place where the West is being viewed with suspicion.
I just hope people know that we're mortified, embarrassed, and that we're doing everything in our power to unseat him as quickly as we possibly can.
They do.
That's encouraging news, though. That's very moving. And it's encouraging to know that you feel you'll be safe, even marching illegally on Election Day. My God.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, we do that. We do it all the time. In fact, in some coffee shops in deep Siberia, you can have a Trump coffee. And I actually ordered it, and I said, "What is that?" And I said, "Is it for Trump or against Trump?" And the woman said, "Whatever you want." It is coffee. It is coffee with orange syrup on top.
Oh God! How
and it's called Trump.
It sounds awful.
Look, they have a sense of humor.
But it's very funny.
Give it to those Russians. Absolutely.
Of course, they have a sense of humor. My God! I mean, anybody who has read Tsveteva knows irony is its greatest moment. And are women a force in this in the protest movement? I imagine they must be.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, they're women, men. It's not. It's really. I mean, that's one of the good things that Soviets did. They really kind of freed women from thinking in gender terms all the time. I mean, it is a very patriarchal society, but women as free as they can be.
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed that for a while there, or still ongoing with Putin's flirtation with the church and with manhood. We talked about this the last time you were on the show, right. That it was taking a giant step backward in terms of women's rights. But there's something sweeping the world about that I think will penetrate and find its mirror among Russian women as well. Nina, thank you for being with us again and sharing your wisdom. There's nobody who has the kind of nuanced intelligence and just expertise that I can possibly think of. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.
Time for one more short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and don't go anywhere because I'll return in just a moment with those fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And here we are back again with some fighting words. The entire country, with the exception of legislators under the financial spell of the NRA, has been moved by the high school students' walkouts and demonstrations. I'm no exception. But I wanted to listen to the students more deeply, to think about their cause, which really is about more than gun reform. It's about having a voice. As I've grown older, ageism has come to be defined in my reality more as discrimination against older people. Yes, Tip O'Neill was right. All politics are local. But ageism goes both ways, of course. Ageism is expressed by those who scoff at these demonstrators, who dismiss their naivete, or, contrarily, their audacity, or both. Yet the kids continue with their principled, peaceful, outraged political determination, which at heart is about their rights not being denied. That got me thinking about suffrage, and I remembered that I'd written about extending suffrage to an earlier age in my book, The Anatomy of Freedom, which is still available as an e-book in all formats. So I took it down and read that chapter, and I was shocked to find that what I'd written before 1982, when the book was published, was still so relevant. I would love to think that I was remarkably ahead of my time, but I'm afraid a more accurate reason for the current timeliness of what I wrote back then is more due to some things having changed so little. Here are some extracts from that chapter, which was inspired by conversations with my son, who was, at the time of that writing, 12 years old. It was a section about how many of us have never bothered to think through the ignorance is bliss indifference of those who have even relative power over those who lack it. Let's take as an example the issue of children's suffrage. Yes, the right of a child to vote. This right is denied to children on a number of grounds, all of them specious. 1. The cuteness defense. No child, that is, a citizen below the age of 18, or in some states 21, has the maturity to vote. Well, whoever puts forth this argument must be measuring maturity in terms of height or reproductive capacity, because any other terms of measurement, well-rounded education, financial independence, emotional stability, intellectual and political acumen, a knowledge of the ways of government and democratic systems, etc., do not describe the current average voter anywhere in the world you get to vote. 2. The dependency defense. No child is autonomous enough to make her or his own voting choice. A child merely will act as a pawn for the parents, voting the way they tell him or her to vote. This defense ought to ring familiar warning bells in every woman's head, since a twin reason, the husband's influence, was given for 50 years as an excuse for denying the vote to women. It's an example of the self-fulfilling property concept. First, rob someone of autonomy and make this person an item of property, and then deny the same person rights on the very grounds that a piece of property wouldn't know how to exercise such rights. The response in terms of children's suffrage might be identical to the one formerly enslaved, then emancipated Africans and later women made. In the privacy of the voting booth, who knows how we might choose? We may well educate ourselves. Husbands, or parents, may influence us. And then again, you might be surprised at how quickly we can balance that influence with our own thoughts and desires once we have the option. Besides, your argument is a priori. A human right is a human right, basic and unqualifiable by credentials allowing one access to that right. 3. The innocence defense. No child is well informed enough on the issues of the day to make reasonable voting decisions, unless, of course, the parents do the informing, in which case they're influencing, and that's unacceptable too. This argument has a Mad Hatter quality of illogic, so debilitating that it makes one wish, like the dormouse, to go back to sleep in the teapot. First, the average adult voter is about as well informed on the issues of the day as a groundhog on weather currents in the upper atmosphere. Indeed, those in political and economic power positions do their damnedest to keep the average voter in just this ill-informed state, despite the contrary efforts of the press. Second, a child can become better informed on the issues in the same way that adults do, by reading newspapers and magazines, by watching television journalism, by monitoring coverage of the candidates, and of course now, by being online. 4. The playfulness defense. Children wouldn't be interested in newspapers and current events and such. They'd be bored. Why burden them? They want to play and have fun. Now, let us leave aside for a moment the fact that the majority of adult voters are bored by current political practice. For every 10 U.S. adults, 6 vote and 4 don't, mostly out of disillusionment and boredom, and in many parts of the country out of voter suppression. The truth is that children play very solemnly, in dead earnest. It's how they learn, in fact. Play is not frivolous or foolish. It's a life-sustaining creative activity. When adults do engage in it, they are called artists. Children are quite capable of being fascinated with the news of our times, and if political rhetoric, legislative terminology, and diplomatic jargon would be impenetrable to a child, well, what an easy solution there is to that one. In order to equip this new voter with the facts, such mystifying codes have to be simplified and clarified. Think how this would alarm those in power. And think, too, how it would relieve the average adult voter, who also, as we well know, cannot penetrate the intentional political obfuscation with understanding. What a benefit to everybody would result. The emperor, in other words, would have to get decently dressed. As for burdening children with rights, oh, how that smacks of paternalism. The white man's burden, as well as the stereotypes of happy, carefree slaves on the plantation, and sweetly silly, childlike women and noble savages. 5. The divide and conquer defense. But where do you draw the line? Should everyone above age 15 be enfranchised? Above 12, 8, 6? Are you going to oppress toddlers? Ha, 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 by excluding them? Once you start with this, you're lost. Don't you see the impossibility of all this? You know, the slippery slope argument. How reminiscent such an argument is of the 19th century position that it was all right for black men to vote, but not for any woman, or that it was acceptable for white women to be enfranchised, but not black women. Surely such a simple standard as functional literacy might be one guideline, thus fixing the voting age, at least to begin with, at 15 years old. Then, once the idea is established, children themselves, along with the rest of the electorate, could debate the practical feasibility of enfranchising even younger citizens. A literacy standard can be misused, of course. Although literacy itself is an objective good, it is a fair credential only when all have equal access to it, when tests are free of cultural values and assumptions, and when they're multilingual. 6. The comic defense. Well, anyway, it's ridiculous. I mean, really, kids voting. I mean, it's funny. This argument, too, is a familiar one to women. Ridicule. When pseudo-logic fails, resort to mockery, derision, scorn. Racial, sexual, and ethnic jokes, humor that gets off on the physically disabled, all are part of this same tactic. When oppressed peoples cease chuckling amiably in response to jokes that degrade their own dignity as human beings, then we're accused of having lost a sense of humor. Apparently, nobody in the power class stops to think of what a deliciously sharp sense of humor the oppressed have when alone and not being overheard, but those jokes happen to be about the oppressor. As the poet Alice Meynell once noted, the sense of humor has other things to do than to make itself conspicuous in the act of laughter. To see children's suffrage as hilarious is as ignorant and arrogant a reaction as it was when proposed non-property holders' suffrage, or, quote, Negro, male suffrage, or women's suffrage were viewed as comparably hilarious. Such laughter is the giggling of the morally and politically bankrupt, and of the scared. The above example of children's suffrage is vital in itself, but also indicative of the way children really are regarded in a culture that purports to adore kids, Disneyland style. The truth about how children are regarded is ugly. Whole housing projects and indeed entire townships deny tenancy to families with children. Children still do manual labor here in the richest superpower nation in the world as migrant farm workers, sharecroppers, and in some mining communities. Children as a subclass within such outgroups as racial minorities suffer higher mortality rates, lack of minimal nutrition, clothing, and education. The growing statistics on the sexual abuse of children are horrifying. Interestingly, fundamentalists, sexual, religious, and political, who are passionate in their defense of the fetus and their own narrow definition of the family, seems unconcerned about what happens to children once babies are past the delivery stage. In fact, they don't even care enough about a healthy fetus, which might mean ensuring good health care, diet, and clean air for even the poorest pregnant woman. No, a fetus, any fetus, is their focus. The right wing has also shown its love for kids peculiarly. It has supported corporal punishment in the schools and at home, denounced child abuse studies and shelters as being subversive of the family, lobbied to deprive public school children of free lunches and of religious freedom by requiring prayer in the classrooms, and more. How I'd love to loose a children's electorate on them. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live. and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.